All right, Dylan.
How are you
So
doing, man?
I'm doing wonderful, amazing. Finally, some good news to react to after some L's. It seemingly. Tell
The
us,
beatdown.
yeah, the beatdown. What is your take on allowing Ukraine to finally use these ATACMs inside Russian territory?
You know, I'm happy about it. It's a good decision. Let's start with that. I think it's going to help for the Battle of Kursk. I don't know how much, but this allows them to hit ammunition storage facilities, which could be supplying troops in the area. It could allow them to hold troop buildups that are happening in the area that are further back. Let's say barracks where troops are sleeping, where they're outside of the range of Ukraine's current systems. It could allow them to hit the air bases that are still within range, but that part out there about still being in range is really important because the Russians have already pulled back the vast majority of the air power that would have been in range had the Biden administration made the decision much earlier. Air bases that have struck Ukrainian cities, air bases that have been used to progress Russian offensives to capture Ukrainian cities and villages. And, while I'm really excited about this, I see a sentiment online, and I kind of somewhat reflect the sentiment of just wondering, once we see in a few days that World War III has not broken out, once we see in a few days that the fear of extreme escalation has not been reciprocated because the Russians don't have a lot of wiggle room to do it unless they want to take gigantic risks that I don't believe they're willing to take. What is going to be on the minds of those who have held back this decision for so long? Are those that have prattled on about this in the ear of the president, or maybe the president's own reflections, whatever you lean more into? Will they be saying, oh my gosh, we should have made this decision sooner? Will they understand the weight of what could have been done if this decision was done sooner and the possible lives it could have saved as we're seeing the largest drones and missile attacks on Ukraine as of right now? So, I mean, those have been going on for like the entirety of the war, and it just leaves me a little bitter about that. So it's a kind of a bittersweet moment for a lot of people, me included.
Why do you think that people on the internet or obvious propagandists choose to focus when we aid Ukraine properly, finally, but they ignore the North Koreans joining the war, for example, or like the clear move to have North Korea become more positioned in Russian security apparatus or whatever? Why do you think this is?
I mean, I think there's two ways to look at it. There's a good faith interpretation and a bad faith interpretation. The bad faith interpretation is they never supported Ukraine to begin with, and so they're hyping up a threat that doesn't exist, but is in favor of like stopping aid, which they don't want to do because they're isolationists, because they support the Russians, because they think Ukraine is too gay or liberal, or it's too it's not serving the anti-imperialist core of anti-Americanism, whatever the fringe viewpoint is, isolationist viewpoint. And let me just say, while a lot of things are fringe, isolationism right now in the United States, it's not fringe. There's the bad faith interpretation, because if you go over to the Middle East and you talk about, Israeli strikes against Iranian assets, if you talk about the possibility of Israel striking a lot of bases in Iran, a good chunk of those people, not necessarily all of them, but a good chunk of those people do change their mind about the possibility of the escalation of nuclear war. I understand the assets are different, but the way they talk about escalation from conflict to conflict, and particularly on the Russian side of the war, mind you, when people talk about escalation, it's in a very childish way of either talking about it only when we do it, and so that you're not showing the full picture, or, and this gets into my second person, to somebody who could be doing it out of good faith. They don't understand that escalation is not like a one-way game if you just stop it by doing nothing. And the less you do, the less escalatory you are. Because there is scenarios where the Russians escalate in a way, say by getting another country to add their troops into the war and having, them invade, so adding new invasions into Ukraine, say a North Korean army, perhaps. And then that's not reciprocated in any way, that's not responded to in any way. That could lead them to think, oh, this is a gap in their defenses. Diplomatically, or for whatever reason, they're not willing to respond to this. Let's see if we can lean on this. And then you threaten not only escalation, but you threaten giving the Russians escalation dominance.
Things that we don't, and things that are not good for our own security inside the United States, are things that most Americans would certainly view as bad, maybe.
No, I mean, look, geopolitics, especially in the atomic era, but in any era where mass armies could bring death, it takes steely resolve to work diplomatically. It takes steely resolve to work in foreign policy, and you cannot be like a child anytime there is a foreign policy engagement where there's an increase in support here, there's a new red line drawn there, or something, there's a new aid here, new aid there. Every single action, people acted like children online. They started whining, they started crying, and every single time anything happened, there was a call of World War III. And every single time, those people were proven wrong. And it's not that there's no threat of escalation, it's that the way they talk about it is hyperbolic in order to get attention, or in order to build up the size of the threat in people's minds, which leads to fear mongering. And I'm just hoping that after, with the long range strike, originally given the ATACMS, that was something that people said could lead to World War III. The strikes on Crimea, we're talking about something that could lead to World War III. And Elon Musk stopped those drones from hitting Crimea out of that threat. So it doesn't just have impact on the Biden administration, has impact on other people who have supported Ukraine, like Elon in the past. And so it's there. I think this threat is useful to the Russians, and the idea that it can limit the Americans either gaining escalation dominance or just stopping them from escalating or increasing support altogether.
Now, what are the soldiers on the ground saying? Because while you do streams, you're also an independent journalist, and you embed yourself with units, and you cover on the ground frontline journalism. So how are the soldiers feeling? I know this is a much anticipated decision that I think everyone's been waiting for. How are they feeling? What have they been saying?
It just happened, and a lot of people are asleep. But for the little bit of rumblings I am hearing, it's positive. They're happy about it, but it's like I said before, it feels bittersweet, because at the end of it, it's going to be the same question, like, oh great, if it helps in some way, why didn't we do this a year ago? Why didn't we do this a year and a half ago? How could this have, helped during the battle to protect Volchansk? Would Volchansk still be in the state it is? How could that have affected other battles? And then there's also the question I heard, and it's a real concern, of course, and this is the biggest concern, and will continue to be the biggest concern, is of supply. Because if you increase their range, you could say you can hit everything up to Vladivostok if you want, but if you only have 10 ATACMS or 20 ATACMS, how much damage can you really do?
What is that looking like for them out there? Do they have enough artillery? Because you've been with demining units and artillery units.
Yeah, I just got back from about a week ago. I was filming with the 68th. I'm heading out again tomorrow, this weekend. We're going to film down south. Just leave it at that. The last conversation I had with artillery units about supply seemed to be much more positive than it was back in March and April. The disparity has shrunk. And I would say, in fact, it shrunk quite significantly. Where before, during the worst parts, I was hearing on some parts of the front of reported from soldiers, of course, and I'm not talking to the commanders that have the actual numbers, but them saying it feels like a 14 to 15 shot difference when I was working with certain grad crews. And it really, that shell disparity had a big impact on the Battle of Avdiivka, had a big impact on other battles in the Donetsk region. And it manifested in Ukraine losing territory, and not only just any territory, but very defensible territory. Avdiivka was a fortress that stood for basically the entirety of the war in the Donbass after the Ukrainians reclaimed it. And it had been built up, and there was a lot of pride there as well. And so, that drop in aid from the West due to partisan gridlock had an impact. But that depths of I guess you could say supply despair have been in large part alleviated. And now I'm hearing about disparities of 1 to 3, which is not, great. It's not fantastic, but it is out of the deep hole that had been dug. And so that's progress. But of course, if they want to block the Russian advance that is still advancing, where they're throwing people on motorcycles, throwing people on dune buggies, overwhelming up all the positions, trying to do that at the same time, and they'll lose a lot of men. But if they find that weak point, because you got some TDF guys that were not really ready for this, and they're not the 33rd, they're not the 68th, they're not the 47th, whatever, and they are put under pressure and they just can't deal with it, and they find that weak point, they punch through, and then they flood it and try to expand the breakthrough. And so far those breakthroughs have been tactical in the region, but the risk, if they're pushing Zaporizhia, as we're hearing rumors about, we already know they're pushing in Kursk very, very hard right now. They're pushing near Kupiansk, and the Oskil River has basically been reached, and they're going to start pushing deeper into Kupiansk. In fact, a few days ago, they even reached Kupiansk itself. The Ukrainians reportedly pushed them out, but the fact that they've gotten that deep is a warning sign. It's something that should set off alarm bells. But so, of course, if we're back to the bad position we were at before, that's still better than the really bad position we were in April. But of course, the artillery disparity is still there.
Is there anything that Biden can do in addition to allowing Ukraine to use these ATACMS in the next 2 months before Trump retakes office?
I mean, the question is going to be about giving them supply now, front loading supply from wherever they can scrape it out of. Because once Trump is in office, I don't know how likely it is going to be that he is going to continue this flow. I think it's probably unlikely, but it all depends on how negotiations go. Because as Russian state media called him, and I don't agree with Russian state media often. They call him an unguided missile. You don't exactly know where he's going to end up. And I believe the Ukrainians needed certainty in their defense planning, so they can, I know how much ammunition I'm going to get at this day, so I can plan this offensive, so I don't just have to stay here or like reserve my shells when there's this big attack because I don't know where the next shell is going to come from. Giving them that some level of operational clarity when it comes to supply. That's a big reason why I was not a big Trump guy. There's many reasons why I'm not a big Trump guy, but that was one among many foreign policy reasons I'm not a big Trump guy is lack of, I think, ideological coherence and just unpredictability on the foreign policy stage, which some people like the madman theory. But the problem is you're actually, just, a sporadic man that makes decisions on the go. That's not necessarily just intimidating your enemies. It's also like confusing your allies. And this, so of course, there's that risk that he could reverse, or Putin comes forward and he offers a really, really bad deal, or Putin refuses negotiations because he really needs to take back Kursk. It's a balance between how much Trump would be willing to give before hurting himself politically because he doesn't want his first Afghanistan. So, I mean, I kind of slid over into Trump talk, but it's kind of hard not to think about it.
It's hard not. I feel it every single day. All right, what are some projects that you have working on? I know you got to get ready for your stream here pretty quick, so I don't want to take you.
Oh no, dude! I'm not streaming tonight. It's Sunday, man.
Oh wow!
I don't stream on Sundays.
Listen.
And plus, I'm headed out tomorrow. I'm gonna go.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Well, I'm gonna be filming down south. Good talk.
Good enough.
I don't. I'm not gonna tell you.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
filming down south.
It's gonna be close enough to the Russians. Filming interviews with people who have been war crimed by the Russians and targeted by the Russians, trying to gather testimony and seeing what's going on down south, because the reports from down south have been pretty bad.
Very important work. And then we had talked, you have like a fundraiser maybe coming up that we're working on, or it's in the works, or?
Yeah, me and Kraut have been talking about doing some fundraiser possibly in the near future. We're just trying to gather people for it now. We're thinking either early December to mid-December. We're thinking possibly doing something around excavators. If it's not excavators, we're sure we could find something else. But obviously right now the situation in Ukraine diplomatically is very uncertain, and it feels like we're in the middle of a coin flip, and we're waiting to see where that coin's going to land. And we can do our best to try to increase the odds that it lands one way through decisions like this, through gaining leverage and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the coin is still flipping. And we know if Trump is really set in stone that he wants to make a decision because he's got Tulsi Gabbard, Matt Gaetz, and a bunch of other interesting knuckle draggers whispering in his ear, you just don't know. And it's very uncertain right now. But no matter what, these are things that can be done to support Ukraine, that can be done to, no matter what, is a certainty that if you fundraise this money or help, support Ukraine either by donating to UA Animals, donating to Save Ukraine, which is, helping to evacuate Ukrainian children from, and this is a question that is, I don't see discussed at all when we talk about deal making. What's going to happen to the kids that have been kidnapped? If the Russians are set in Russification, and they don't want to give up these kids, possibly because of the testimony that could be talked about, or because they see it as part of and parcel of their policy to Russify occupied territory, and therefore they have to continue to do that. That has been something I haven't heard at all talked about in negotiations. And so in order for those kids, donate to Save Ukraine. Or if you've already done all that and given to everybody else in existence in this country, you could also go to DylanBurns.tv and help me fundraise or donate to help me do my war journalism stuff, so I can pay fixers, translators, and have some gasoline, because the gasoline it kills you.
And how can people follow you? So you just dropped one, but tell the viewers how they can follow you and follow your work.
Sure. Dylan Burns TV on YouTube. I released a video about 8 days ago, or 6-7 days ago, called Up Close and Personal with Ukrainian Mortarmen. It's a 40-minute video over 2 night missions on the ellipse axis, as they deal with drone threats and have to set up their drone in night missions. We talk about thermal imaging, the different roles of mortarmen. They talk about their complaints with military police and the divisions in Ukrainian society, the treatment upon going home, and the distance you can feel with others who just don't realize exactly what the front line is like. A lot of really interesting stuff. That's why it's up close and personal, after all. So people can go check that out on Dylan Burns TV. You can also follow me on Twitter, DylanBurns1776, Instagram, Dylan Burns TV. I post pictures of the war there, or Dylan Burns Live if you want to hear me ramble like this on the daily. Weekdays at 6 p.m. EST.
Absolutely. We're going to talk next week because I really want to hear how excited you are about Vivek Ramaswamy actually being in the government, or a concept of a
look here, I gotta tell you
your favorite
on Vivek. I'm just happy he's not press secretary or press officer or something where I was gonna have to listen to every report from the government through Vivek's smarmy face. No, look, if there's 2 ways to think about the Doge thing, the Doge government organization. Which is gonna be, I think it's gonna be folded into the Department of Big Chungus and like I has cheese or whatever. Okay, look, there's a risk that this becomes an actual influential kind of think tank where where Elon's just kind of rapid firing different deregulation policies to help him or his friends or whatever he thinks is the ideological fervor that takes him on Twitter, grabs him on the daily. Or it's the F-off appointment. Yeah. And Donald Trump thinks Elon is annoying, and he doesn't want to put him in the government, and so they're making a fake little meme thing for him so he can go around and be like, I got Doge, and it's Trump already annoyed deeply with him, but still wants his money.
Vivek said, if you have an odd number in your social security number, you're gone. I'm like, what? All right, we'll talk about that next week, though. Lots to talk about because I'm sure there'll be more. And I'll get your take on all of what's happening in the American government this coming week. It's Sunday, so tomorrow and when you get back from your when are you going to be streaming again?
I mean, I might be streaming while I'm out there too, depending on like if I have the energy or not, because the bills are always there. But I'll be back late that week.
All right,
so late next week.
Cool, sounds good. We'll chat then.
Okay, man.
All right, buddy.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Stay safe.
Yep. Here's Dylan's YouTube channel, Dylan Burns Live, but then there's also Dylan Burns TV, his live channel, and then his main channel, which is bigger, somehow gets pushed down. Dylan, your live channel is favored more than your TV channel. I have to like really search for this thing.